13 Questions by Man Transcending. Manhood in the Digital Age.
You ready for intro time?
Yeah. So what'd you think of the interview?
I thought it was great. Jay is just such a personable dude. That's why I took a lot of his courses when I was going to college there, and I had to have him sign off on something towards the end of the 4 years, and he was looking at the list of everything I had completed, and a lot of them were his courses, and he made a comment about something about well, I'm glad, because there was one course on there that I took that wasn't, he didn't teach, and he said something along the lines of, oh well, I'm glad that you're not getting a degree in me. Just Jay, I just thought it was funny because I made it a point to seek out
classes,
any any of the courses that he was offering. I would try to enroll in. But,
that's awesome.
Just a super likable, easy to get along with, easygoing, low key dude. And I just always admired him as a professor when I was at IUSB, and of course going to the Dominican. The story like that doesn't really leave you. So of course
you've had an experience with another person. It's what we were talking about before. You know him on a totally different level, that it gives you deeper understanding of everything else. So yeah, it's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, and I didn't expect it to go into the zombies.
That definitely didn't see that one coming. No, that was great.
Yeah.
And it seems stupid, but the idea of the ghoul and the zombie being culture, I didn't want it to go too much cultural on him, but I just found that very interesting, that the zombie and the ghoul are the same thing, but the ghoul is just an already cursed being that's there, but the zombie is a cursed person. You don't want to become a zombie. You're already the ghoul. I don't know why that distinction clicks in my mind as being different on the same concept. But when you take that and then you go, well, let's use a substance like drugs, we can now make a ghoul a real thing. And it has now it's a zombie. So I don't know why that.
No, that is super interesting. And I just think I did not see us ending the conversation on the note of zombies.
I never thought I'd hear somebody say they wanted to be a zombie.
Exactly.
That's the
different
one thing
approach to the question. I love it.
But then when he's like, I wouldn't have any thought, I'm like, yeah, but then if you want to be a zombie, but what if you did? Now that is an interesting thought experiment to me, where I'm like, and that's why it literally took me straight into the toxoplasmosis, because I'm going, man, that's controlling us right now. We're a zombie to something. There are people out there who die from risky behavior, right? This thing made them die. They had the same thing that was happening to the mouse in them. That's fucking weird. And then my mind just goes into mind viruses and, animism, and thoughts as actually being things that have their own life to them when they're brought into the world, and everything's that way. And then it just, my brain melts down into wondering how much control we really have.
Yeah. And so that conversation is in the bonus section. So if the listeners that are listening to the intro right now, be sure to join the Discord. We talked about it a little bit in the interview. It is free, and there you will find the link to the bonus feed, which will have the full length episode. So you'll get the bonus content.
And we should also mention this episode is with Jay. I need to look at his name to enunciate it properly. I know you've taken a lot of courses with him. How do you say that, my friend?
VanderVeen.
VanderVeen. I keep wanting to say Vanderbeek, and that's just programmed into me through Hollywood.
Vanderbeek?
James Vanderbeek.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, I think it was Dawson's Creek, around that same era.
Me in Hollywood. I don't know much about Hollywood.
That's a beautiful thing.
Right. But Discord. That's free. It's fun. It adds another complex level to this show. If you want to interact with, if you find Adam and I are interesting people, you can come and talk to us there. Some of the guests have made an account and are hanging around there. So come and join the conversation if you haven't yet.
Yeah, a lot of cool stuff going on over there. A lot of stuff showing up in the chats. A lot of photos being shared. A lot of conversation. It's a beautiful thing to see people coming together around the show. So I kind of like the idea that this show brings knowledge and wisdom, more like wisdom, that deep intrinsic, something that's pulled through the eons to people. Like, I like that we bring that, but I mean, it's beautiful having a wonderful plate of food, but you gotta masticate it. And what's better than masticating and eating that food and digesting it? It's digesting it with your friends, and they bring their casserole and you sit around and you have a conversation. And, to me, the Discord is an extension of that. It gives that, that table to enjoy the meal.
And I found it especially helpful when people are, spending more time indoors lately than normally would. It's nice to have, a community there where you can go and talk to people and get some of that, back and forth human interaction you might not normally get or aren't getting as much of as you're used to.
We need community. It's something that's being pulled from us. And, you might not be able to get it in the full interaction, being able to hang out at the bar or go to the concerts like you used to. But that doesn't mean that there isn't value in the digital hangout. So, you can still absorb those good vibes from people, share that knowledge, tweak your brain. Look, it's a muscle. If you want to keep those thoughts sharp, you need to think about the things you want to think about. And you're here. It's a podcast for self-growth. And I don't know what we're going to do with the chats, but we're all here for the same reason. So means we can do something great.
Yeah. Who knows what happens when people start talking. Beautiful things happen. So come and be a part of the magic. And
everything in the world is from people talking. Every organization, nobody could build an automobile, let alone maybe a pair of roller skates or something. But, you need the team to build the transistor, to build the LED, to build the microchip. This isn't one guy. Those are all conversations involving hundreds of thousands of people, and our Discord, whatever can become of it. The conversation can make us do great things and push the world in great directions and make great change. So don't think that hanging out and chatting in a Discord is wasted time. Maybe it is, but maybe the world will become a better place because of it.
You won't know until you find out.
That's right.
Make an account. Come on over and see us. So speaking of adding, layers to the show and having a more complex flavor to this project than just a podcast is the fact that we're trying to make this as open source as possible. So that means you, the listener, if you have somebody, a role model in your life, or of somebody that is a model citizen, that could be your parent, your grandparent, somebody that you respect, that you admire, that you think has something meaningful to say and would have good answers to these questions. We encourage you to go out and sit down with that person, have the conversation, record it, send it over to us. We can make an episode out of it. And Adam is pretty good at directing people as to what to record with, if depending on what you have, and tips like that. So
yeah, we'll have a simple conversation. I'll find out what you own in the environment that you have, and we'll figure out a way to utilize it the best. I mean, I'm using packaging foam on my walls, towels on the floor. These are all good things, professional quality, but you can do just by cleaning out your laundry hamper or something. It can be dirty socks on the ground to stop an echo. I got your back. I'll make your phone work. And if not, we will get you on the path to finding the solution for you. I don't know. I like doing it. It's fun.
Yeah. So we're a resource here for you guys. Reach out if you have any questions or you need help with anything.
Yep. Or if you want to
And,
get access to the back end of the bonus questions here at the end, you will find those by joining up in the Discord. But if for some reason you cannot, or don't have the technology, no smartphone, that's fine. If you got access to email, obviously you downloaded the show, so you're digital somehow. We'll make sure that we get you that. This is for everybody. We want it to be shared. This is, it's knowledge, man. This is the most impactful things in my life when I think back to them, aside from like near-death type experience. It's the things that have been said to me, the advice, the thing that gave me a new perspective, because that new perspective let me see the whole world in a brand new light. Literally like that. There was never purple. See it from an angle you could never see it from. So it's kind of in the way you hear people who are in cults. They had this one view of the entire world, and then one day it started unraveling, and there, everything was upside down. It was completely different. They saw it for what it was. And, I love things that you're living your life normally, and then all of a sudden, boom, there's that thing that gives you that completely new perspective. And this show has given me that on occasion. And I don't know where I'm going with this, Bill, but it's what I love about the questions.
Yeah. I mean, and plus, just all this content is free. The Discord's free. The episode's free. We do require, to get to the bonus questions, there's a little action, but there's no paywall. There's an action of creating a Discord account, but free doesn't necessarily mean that it's without value. And that's the other thing that kind of makes this podcast a little unique compared to some others, is that there's no paywall here. So everything that we do is value for value. So we talked a lot about coffee in this episode. If a good way to think about supporting not only supporting us but other podcast creators is to think about if you go to the coffee store on a regular basis and spend $5 or $7 in one day for a cup of coffee, then just doing that once a month to some of your favorite podcasters would helps them out immensely. It encourages them. It would encourage us. So yeah, we encourage you to give what you think is fair or not. But we're going to be here doing it, and it would So support the show if you want.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one of those. You can help make the show what it is, make it grow. We appreciate all of your support, whether it's by, not just requesting a Discord link, sending in an email to us, telling us what you think of the show, how it's anything. People can go and support the show just by telling us how they're enjoying it. I'm interested in hearing the effect that the digestion of the questions have, because, in the same way that I just mentioned, I have new perspectives, new changes, new ways of thinking. At the end of this episode, at the end of the bonus questions, it seems very simple. It's a very Halloween theme, but I had a very interesting shifting view and angle on culture that was really, really fun to have. And I love when those things happen. So I'd like to hear from other people when that happens with them, because I'm sure that people are associating things in different ways and I'm not able to see it. But if I have that Lego that you got, man, we can start building a new set. So yeah, reach out, tell us what you think. Tell us, your interpretations of the podcast. I'm interested. Or support the show monetarily. I want to say things break, but the episode before this, I lost 2 cables in a row, or not 2 cables. I lost my mic cable, and then while adjusting my mic cable, because I was getting this dropout, my knob broke on my mic stand. It's like, oh my gosh. Like, of course it's going to happen at the same time, which is great because I was already handling it. But the point is, things do break and we occasionally need a new cable. So, that cup of coffee, that'll cover my knob. Wait, okay. I'm sorry.
Well, hold on.
Back to you, Bill.
These are cheap date. No, okay. Just rolling right along here. The gratitude segment, we do have, hopefully, I think somebody's working on a jingle for us. but I won't say too much more beyond that. Maybe sometime in the near future, possibly after the first of the year, maybe we might have a little intro jingle to play for this segment. But it's just something that we like to do every show, just to kind of um, put people in a different mindset of taking a second to think about something that you're grateful for, because that can have a really positive effect on your attitude, even if you're not in a bad attitude when you're listening to this. But for me today, personally, I just wanted to talk a little bit about how I'm grateful for space heaters, because mine broke last night.
Oh.
Yeah, I was being stupid and covered it up for just like a second with a blanket, and it like sparked, and then it shut off, and it turns back on, but it doesn't make any heat now. So
Yeah,
now
you probably blew your thermal couple on the heater, a safety device. Hey, at least the new ones have that.
yeah, it was weird because it wasn't even covered for that long, and it just kind of sparked and then died. So I've had to purchase a new space heater, which I wasn't really planning on doing, but I am now.
Is it
So
ceramic?
yeah, what's that?
Is it ceramic?
Uh, no, it's oil.
Okay.
Oil.
Yep. Oils are
Yeah.
very good for radiant heat. That's my second favorite. But you're going for a little larger design for a bigger room. I like it.
Yeah, I've got a lot of space to cover here. So yeah, it's just getting colder up here. I sit by a window most of the day. It's a little drafty. So yeah, I'm thankful for space heaters.
Well, Bill, you definitely solidified mine, which is I'm thankful for the weather. Just like you're thankful for the heat. It's been brutal down here this summer. So we're finally starting to get this winter October weather, which for the last week has been torrential downpours, and it's kept the air super humid. So it's still muggy. And, when it's, 85 and humid and like 98% humidity, it's still bad, but it's way better than summer. You're not getting baked. And I'm incredibly thankful that season is upon us. And I love weather. I'm a weather junkie. If there's a tornado, I'm running outside. I'm going to look at it. During hurricanes, I'm outside in the middle of them as long as I'm not under trees or on the wrong side of the wind. I am smart. I'm not going to get, knocked out by a limb or, have an electrical line dropped on me. But I love the weather. I love the season change. I really enjoy it because the summer sucked so much. So I'm just going to say I'm grateful for changes in weather because I couldn't enjoy one without the other.
Right on. Absolutely. And I think that I'm grateful that that I am able to experience a stark difference in the seasons, because I'm further north than you, and just having the dead period where everything's cold and covered in snow, it can be beautiful, but contrasting it to summer when everything's vibrant and full of life, it really you get to observe nature more and experience it.
Everything is
So I
green
think that's cool.
year round by me, unless you go to the beach and then it's brown sand.
Or white. You got white sand down there too, right?
I guess it's a lighter color, but I guess it's sandy.
All right, guys. Well, I think that'll do it for the intro. I hope you enjoy the interview. Hope you enjoy the chat. I did. So there you go. Okay, guys, welcome back. This episode is a little bit of a special treat for anybody that's actually following along with some show lore, possibly my episode that was released. I told a story about me being in the Dominican Republic and getting a boo-boo while I was over there, and I had to get some stitches and whatnot. And to this episode's guest is actually the professor that coordinated that trip and allowed me to have that experience, which I do think was very important. And like, oh, I've talked about it on the show before, so you guys know all about that and how I feel. And it was a good, positive overall experience. And so, yeah, Jay, welcome. Thank you for showing up.
Thank you. And thank you for asking me after I went ahead and pushed you down the stairs. Wait, did you tell people that part too?
No, I cut that out. So, yeah, I guess we will just go ahead and jump right into the first question. What was the best advice ever given to you? Would you modify it at all today?
Here's a different answer. This advice wasn't given to me. This advice was put out there for everybody by two men who earned a lot of respect in the last decade. That would be the Mythbusters. And I, in fact, even have on my wall of my lab a big old sign that comes straight from their show where failure is always an option. And I really do hold that to be true. I share that with the students, not only during class, but I think about that myself in doing my own research, because it really is. Failure is always an option, and we need to be accounting for that. We need to be cognizant of that. And when things go wrong, we can step back and go, yeah, all right, that's going to happen. I kind of predicted that something like that would happen. And then that allows us to set ourselves straight, or at least myself, and hopefully my students, when I'm flunking them out of a particular class. It's like, well, I told you this was going to happen. What are we going to do now? Let's reset. Let's go ahead and get back on that horse. So I agree with the failure is always an option, and I like to use that myself. How would I modify it today? Probably that failure happens more than we want it to, and everybody else is failing around us too, which is a dangerous world.
Yeah, I think failure is more of an option, or is more likely of an option than success. Honestly, in most cases.
And that's the key. If we fear failure, it can prevent us from seeking success. So if you never take that step because you're afraid of what's going to happen if you do, you're not going to get anywhere. So there really is some benefit to understanding that failure happens regularly. It's not something we necessarily must be afraid or ashamed of. And that allows us to reach out for more success.
Yeah, speaking of fear, that is a weird driving force, because people often equate failure with bad, negative things. Well, of course, yeah, it's kind of sucks that you didn't accomplish the task that you were trying to do, but because that experience, you're able to take it and use it as a learning experience, that actually is a positive thing. So yeah, failure is bad, but in the grand scheme of things, if you realize it's going to happen, and you can kind of have the experience of failure, like familiarity breeds a kind of a less scary picture of failure. So that that's how I think of it.
Yep. I mean, I am always wanting to try new things, and very few of us are absolutely perfect the first time we try. So whether we're cooking something new in the kitchen, whether we're picking up a new sport, whether we're challenging ourselves by driving home a different way without a map, whatever it happens to be, those small failures, they are things from which we learn.
Yep, couldn't agree more. All right, question number 2. What was the most important lesson you learned from your parents?
I've been thinking about this. My parents are aging. I'm not able to see them as much as before because of the current situation, because of where they need to go and so on. And I'm trying to think, what types of things have I learned from them? What types of things do I want to pass on to my own son? And I think probably today's most important thing, they can probably always change, but today's most important thing is empathy. My parents showed me, they demonstrated, they modeled empathy for others. And I do believe in the long run that turned me into who I am, both professionally and personally. They were able to show me. Again, this isn't something they sat down and say, Jay, you need to listen to people and walk a mile in their shoes type of a thing. What they did by their actions were they were mostly kind, they were mostly honest, but what they really did were try to take into account other people's perspectives. It doesn't mean that they floated in the wind and didn't have their own value system or anything like that. But what they showed me was that although they might think they are right, my parents might think my parents are right, my parents also gave evidence of at least listening to other points of view, of thinking about the other person. So you see somebody as you're driving down the street and you can go, oh, that guy's doing something weird. That must be, a person who's nutso or whatever the word is that you use at that particular time. But they might just say, yeah, I knew that guy. I knew his parents. He's had a hard life. He did this thing. And it doesn't necessarily, I don't mean that we have to sympathize for them, and we don't, which is also a relatively good thing. But if we can think about where other people come from, if we can think about other people's perspectives, other people's cultural beliefs, and we take those into account when we're interacting with those people, I think I have been more successful in that. And again, as I'm a professor of anthropology, it'll probably come up 15 times, but as an anthropologist, that's what I try to teach my students. That really is one of our major keys, is the idea of cultural relativity. It's our way to fight against ethnocentrism. So everybody knows what they know, and they are fearful of things they don't know. I try to show the students, look, other people do things in different ways. It doesn't mean it's worse than yours. It doesn't mean it's better than yours. But if you understand where they're coming from, if you understand the reasons why they do that thing that seems odd to you, you'll be much more likely to understand at least why they're doing it, and not discount it as trivial or bizarre or exotic or any of those things. It's like, yeah, I get it now. I know why they do that. So empathy is a weird thing in that way, but I really do think my parents, in raising their 3 sons, modeled that really well. They were respectful of others, they listened, but they also allowed me to sort of ask my own questions. And I think that empathy led into those things.
Yeah, it's a very good thing. I mean, it's something that we're completely lacking with social media nowadays. You don't get that understanding of a person. It's just whatever view, whatever point, swipe left, swipe right. You grow up from a child into this media now, as where, when we were kids, you knew somebody for their flaws and their good things. Yeah, that's Joe, but XYZ. And, everybody was a screw up in some way. But now, I mean, everybody's got to have the likes and the perfect photo. So it's weird. Like, it's incredibly important, and it almost seems like it's a quality for the aged.
I hadn't thought about the filters. That's always a problem too. Not something I am of the aged, so I don't know much about that. But I do take your idea about social media particularly, and even just electronic communications. We lose facial cues. You lose the gestures, and without interacting for a while with somebody, you might not know why they asked that. So I've recently gone on to Reddit. My son turned me on to Reddit, and there's a subreddit there that I really enjoy. It's the WTW or WTP. It's what's the phrase or what's the word for? And somebody will go, hey, what's this feeling when you walk by a really empty place and you feel it's weird in your gut? What's the name for that? What's the word for that? And I like that as a teacher. I like to go in and I like to go, oh, I know that, and here's what I think it might be. I had a long, unfortunate conversation, and I'm putting that in air quotes, with somebody I don't think would have happened in real life, because that's somebody who I was communicating with. They said that the feeling was one thing, and I explained that that it wasn't that thing. The person was wrong, and they couldn't. The idea was liminality, liminal spaces. And as an anthropologist, that's one of the things we own. Victor Turner, the anthropologist, created that idea, right? He's one, Van Gennep did it, but Victor Turner took that. So I came in and I said, dude, you're wrong. It's this. That's liminality. What you're talking about might be something else. And I think face to face, I wouldn't have done that with the person because I would have engaged with them longer. I would have saw that maybe they had it from a different point of view, and they understood liminality. Eventually, it turned out there's some subreddit of liminal spaces, and that person was a big fan of that, and it was doing things incorrectly. But that's how the person understood the concept. So what I'm trying to get at is because I didn't sit and talk with them first, if I didn't interact and engage with them in a more personal way, I just came right out and slammed them, and they hit back. And it really was unfortunate. I went to bed at night angry because they're not listening to me online, and that's an issue. So I had to
right, but you kind of have to do that because if you interacted with every person like you would a person you were sitting down to have a conversation with, you'd have no time. You can't do that with the scrolling text, anyways. And you mentioned it, facial cues. You know, I saw somewhere eye blinks. Eye blinks are an important cue in when you're ending sentences or, communicating. And this was at least noticed in the place that I heard by a director who noticed that when he was, an editor, I should say, when he was editing scenes for these big movies, that he was cutting on the blinks naturally. The actors were blinking on. He goes, oh, that's like the natural end of a scene. And that's so cool. You miss that. Like even now we're looking at each other, but the frame rate, you can't get it. Even just the natural distance is going to throw us off. And so that's one thing that somebody noticed. There's probably dozens that we're projecting.
Yep.
Sorry to steal your question.
And Jay, you mentioned having an understanding of why people act the way they do, like, the reasons behind this or that, or, something that maybe you don't have a clear understanding of why they're acting that way or whatnot. So I was kind of thinking about this earlier today, is that people are, nobody's out to do, I guess I should say, I hope nobody's out to, starts out their day sitting, I'm going to do some evil today. Like, how can I, create evil in the world? Like, people are only going off of the information that they have available to them. So when people are acting in ways that we don't understand, I think empathy is absolutely imperative to have, because you don't know, what information this person has digested, or like what customs they grew up with, and like what explains their actions. So I just think that's important to point out, because it just seems like in the way things are going right now, some people might say that is pretty polarized in society. So I think that having empathy is absolutely important. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents. Moving on to question 3. What book was most influential on your life, and why?
I have read voraciously. And in fact, I come from a relatively educated family. My father was a high school teacher. All of my brothers went on and got post-secondary degrees. We just enjoyed learning. We enjoyed reading. I had books all over the house. I don't remember a time when I don't have books, and they weren't to decorate. They were just there. And my house now, and when people come over and visit, they remark on the amount of books that my family now has accumulated. My wife and son and I. It's all three of us just do that. But I think the most influential book. So it's a long way of saying everything I read, hopefully I get something out of. If it's just joy, if it's wonderment, if it's learning one interesting thing. But I think the one book that I would give to everybody, that I would recommend to everybody, the one book that I would carry with me to the stereotypical deserted island, whatever it happens to be, depends on each day. And I hopefully wouldn't just have one. But Charles Darwin's On the Origin of the Species has really become my touchstone book. It's written well. It's written artistically, and you wouldn't imagine that for a nonfiction science text. He uses artful language throughout, but he's also expressing an idea that I keep going back and reading and sharing with others. And in my position at the university, I was able to run a theme year where we chose one book for the entire campus. And that book was the one we used. I've used that book in a number of classes where I've just taught nothing but Darwin and what he was and doing. In fact, there's even been a pedagogical method called reacting to the past, where the students take on roles. They are basically role playing. They're like live action role playing for a historical moment in time. And the class that I taught had them working on what's known as the Copley Medal. It was given by the Royal Society. And there were people that didn't want Darwin to get it, and there were people that wanted Darwin to get it. Darwin, by the way, couldn't care less. But they were fighting on each other's sides, and I had my students read all of those writings on both sides and read the book. And I really do find this an influential book for me. I am an advocate for the theory of evolution. I have to find different words, because I can't say I believe in the theory of evolution, because that's like saying I believe in the theory of gravity, and it doesn't matter if I believe it or not. Right. It's going to happen.
Yeah, things are.
So I'm an advocate for the theory of evolution by natural selection, and I really do try to use Darwin's ideas, his writings, just the fact that the man bucked convention, but did so in a really low-key way, is something that has influenced me ever since.
Yeah, I actually have not read that book, so I'm not too. I mean, I know who Darwin is, of course, and so I'm not too familiar with the backstory. But I know that he was urged by his friends to like kind of publish the book, wasn't he? Like he was kind of hesitant to do so to begin with, and then
that's absolutely correct. Like myself, Darwin was a world-class procrastinator, and he was always writing stuff down. He was continuing to do experiments and new things, but he wasn't spurred to publish it until a colleague / competitor gave him a quick little letter. And so this is Alfred Russel Wallace, and Wallace, as far as I know, didn't really personally know Darwin. He just knew of him and the things that he was doing. And Wallace said, "Hey, dude, I got this really cool idea." Tiny backstory. Wallace is hanging out in the Pacific West, the Western Pacific, like the Papua New Guinea type of area. And the story is he was suffering from malarial fevers. So he's hanging out in his hammock and he's kind of hallucinating.
Yeah.
Roughing out. He's going a little bit odd. And he comes up with essentially Darwin's theory as well, and pretty much at the same time. So he jots a little note off to Darwin, says, "Chuck, I think you'd love to hear about this." And Charles looks at the theory, and he has actually written down, I couldn't have written a better abstract for my idea than what this guy just gave me. So Charles decided he had to actually put it on paper and get it published. The two of them published their papers simultaneously in the journal, but D comes before W alphabetically. So Chuck's was first. And people read, so this wasn't the book, but the first sort of
right, yeah, like the paper.
Royal Society. And everybody, so people go, "Hey, Darwin's got an idea," and then he finally fleshed it out into a really long book that most people have never read the whole thing, just parts. But hey, it's kind of like the Bible too, that way. Just sacrilege, I know. So yeah, he was spurred to do it, and then he wrote it, and he kind of just hung back, and he had everybody else fight on his behalf. They took on his battles. It just wasn't his game.
Yep, and the Royal Society is still around today, isn't it? Are they still doing stuff?
It is. They're still doing stuff. And I walked in last summer. So my wife brought my son and I to London. She was doing this legal tour. She was leading a legal tour, and we trailed along because why not? And while they were doing the really cool barrister things, I dragged my kid on a walking tour of all of the sites that I knew that Darwin went to. So like the house where he stayed at, the place where he went and got the guns that he took with him on the Beagle, the place where his brother lived and he hung out there.
That's awesome.
And then the Royal Society. And we walked to each of those places because London is a tiny little town. at least the old part of it, much smaller than I would have thought. And so we walked into the Royal Society, just marching right in, opened up the door, and then the person at the front desk said, "Can we help you?" And I said, "I don't know. You got anything going on? You got a bookstore? I don't know." And then they quickly escorted me out.
That's awesome. Oh man, that makes Darwin really unique in my mind, because it was most people, you create an idea or a new thing, but he's not willing to fight for it. He's like, no, it stands on its own. That's fine. Like, that's such a different person. Like, most people, like, they feel an ownership, but once you do that, then, I mean, really, can you be biased? So that's really awesome for Darwin.
I think you can always be biased. He was just an unassuming guy. From what all of that I read, he went to school to be a country pastor. He wasn't going to get into science. That was an easy way. He basically said, well, that way I can kind of just do my own thing, be relatively quiet, and just have this one thing I have to do on Sundays, and that's cool. And then was picked by somebody else to travel around the world on the HMS Beagle. Essentially, his job was just to keep the captain company with a smart fella. So it was his spring break. It was his Rumspringer, whatever we want to call it. And he went around to the trip, and then he got back and continued to do science and had really great ideas. But he didn't seem to advocate for them strongly. He had a lot of people that became like Darwin's bulldogs, was the name of these people, like Aldous Huxley. People would just tear into others on the social media of the time. They would write letters furiously against each other. From what it seemed, Darwin just kind of hung back. He was relatively frequently ill. But he would rather just kind of hang out in his little cottage in Downhouse and just chill, which I appreciate.
Right on. All right, you ready for question 4? What daily habits or rituals do you have?
Coffee is a ritual. Particularly now, I'm not even leaving the house very often. I have a sign right on over my shoulder here on my office coffee machines. It comes from Stranger Things, and my son got it for me, and I hang it here. It says, "Mornings are for coffee and contemplation." And I loved that part. So the sheriff is walking through his police station, and people start running up to him early in the morning when he's carrying his coffee, and he just shuts them down. It's like, don't talk to me right now. Mornings are for coffee and contemplation. So every morning I sit at the counter, still with my son. He's 17 now. We both sit together and have breakfast. We don't say much. I listen to the NPR station. I read a newspaper, a physical, actual paper, and I drink a coffee and I sit quietly. I think for me, if I didn't get to do those things, if I don't get to listen to Morning Edition, if I don't get coffee, I feel grumpy. I feel put out. So I really do think that takes the form of a ritual. Something I've done recently, probably now for 2 years, is the New York Times crossword puzzle. That was purchased for me. The app of it was purchased for me for Father's Day. They didn't know what to buy me. And the next year I said, you can just do that again. Sign up for the crossword puzzle again. And those have sort of formed a ritual. It's gamification. I get rewarded when I get a little gold star comes up on my iPad. But I enjoy doing that. So those are some of the rituals. The daily things, the coffee and quietness.
Yeah, coffee has definitely been something that has become more complex since the whole COVID and the quarantine, because I've been able to work remotely for more than a few months now, and I wasn't ever a huge coffee drinker. But now that, I'm living where I work, essentially, I have a lot more time to make it fancy and not just do a K-cup thing. So I've got, the whole beans and the grinder and all the different, ingredients you can put in it and stuff. So
are they? So in your opinion, it's better when you grind it yourself than a K-cup?
Yes. Yeah, I can say that from an experience standpoint, and I've also, that's what they say, they in quotes or whatever. So I've experienced it to be true.
I can't argue that you think it's better. But I am the type of person where if my brother-in-law we're all together at the house, my brother-in-law says, "Oh, I'm going to make a special Starbucks run," and everybody gives him orders that are 15 things long and have all of these requirements. My strangest drink is an Americano. It's like take an espresso and add hot water. That's it. So I really enjoy fancy coffee. I went to the roastery in Seattle, the big Starbucks mothership store where they do all of these exotic things. And I tried it and it was fine. But I would also be more than happy to go to the Stop and Rob down the street and take the coffee out of the urn. I'm not picky in that way. So as long as it's hot, I enjoy it. Even on hot days, which is a weirder thing that old people do now.
I do it too. So, but yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm drinking my fair share of McDonald's coffee or whatever. It's just become more complex over the last year.
Some people get the enjoyment. Speaking of the ritual, it's all of the sort of hand motions. It's the press and the weight and the grind and the all of the accoutrements do make it also literally a ritual, a thing that brings solace to the mind, even if it is really all that aside from the caffeine, not really all that utilitarian.
But you have a time of focus, like in the world, especially now, we don't there may be things going on. Like when you fast, all these systems get turned on that start cleaning out all these cancerous cells and things when you focus your mind, you may be, allowing other things that improve your normal mental state. It's like, there's some devices you need to turn them off and let them rest for 30 seconds before you reboot them. Maybe that's all you really need is that 10 minutes of just pushed everything else out.
And if it works for people, I think coffee is a relatively mild vice. So if you want to make the super cool French press, more power to you, because it gives you that sense of control that is lacking in the world. It's like, I'm going to make this coffee exactly how I want. It is exactly 30 ounces of beans, and the beans are stored in this certain way so they're not touched by any air and oxidation, and everything's exact, which is fine. Or it's like, I can't think that much. I want to put a K-cup in, so I just get my shot of caffeine as soon as physically possible.
Yeah. Fun fact: when you get the coffee jitters, it's actually caused by mold growing on the bean. It doesn't have anything to do with the coffee itself. I didn't know that until recently. So, question 5: if I were to ask your best friend, what is the one thing they would say you need to work on the most, and why?
Someone who I know well told me very recently, as in within this week, they appreciated the fact that I am soft and try to please others. But this person also saw that as a detriment. And we were having a discussion about making a hard choice and it would affect somebody else. And I was it's a chapter in a book. It's like, well, what if I personally moved these paragraphs around and added this other thing in? And this friend said, but the chapter still, it still doesn't work. I mean, we should just say no. And you seem to have problems telling people no. I do. I try not to be confrontational. It makes me uncomfortable. I would rather go a little bit extra on my own behalf than ask somebody to do something else or make somebody do a task I don't think it's one of those things where I am the type of person, I don't know if it's Midwestern, I don't know if it's the way I raised, but I would be the person in the restaurant that would get up and, if we dropped a fork, I would get up and go over to the counter and just grab one myself rather than wave down a waiter and have them come over. And it's that type of thing where I would kind of just rather do it than put an onus or a burden on somebody else. So she said it was not a bad thing, but I was called soft. And I agree with it. I don't know if I'm going to fix it or not, but I am. And I hope that's not an answer like, well.
But that's not terrible, right? Because there's some people that may be too hard. So the biggest thing, so I mean, there's room to grow in all directions. That, I mean, to me, that's the biggest compliment, is to say, everything has a yin and a yang. So, when you flex this muscle, just realize that, you're leaving yourself susceptible. So,
Right. Yeah, I don't want this to come across. There's that stereotypical. You watch a cartoon, and the interviewer for a job is saying, "What's your weakness?" I try too hard, or whatever it happens to be. So it's not. I'm not humble bragging by saying soft. She meant it in a critical way, and I agree with it. And you're right. There are people who are much too hard. So I think the happy medium, the Goldilocks, is something that eludes me.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, confrontation is something that I struggle with too, and I think it's probably more common than we think. But I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I'm the person that is driving, that goes out of their way to not inconvenience other people, like on the roadway. Like if someone's tailgating me, it's like, oh, I must be going too slow, so I'll speed up. So, yeah, I completely agree with you on that one. Question 6: what are you most curious about?
Yeah, that question is not going to work because the answer is everything. That's really what I do for a living. I learn. I think about things. That's what I get paid to do, and then tell other people how to do it. But I really am curious about everything. I will hear a statement on the radio. I don't want to sort of timestamp this by putting something that isn't very evergreen. So, but some news story comes out and it's something I had not yet heard about. Two things will happen. One, my mind would go, "What the hell? I'm slacking. Why don't I know that? That's a thing. I should know all things." So first, my mind gives me a little bit of a wake up call and said, "You need to know more about that." And then the second thing I'm doing is I'm researching that, and I'm not just sort of going to the easy sites. I'm going to the New York Times, the BBC. I want to know that thing. I'll go to and dig into the peer-reviewed literature about that thing. So NASA says something is happening on a comet. I want to know that. I'm not a physicist. I'm not an astronomer, but damn, I'm curious. And I'm really curious about everything. I like to know everything. I've done one of these tests, and it was sort of to gauge your strengths, and it's we used it in some of our classes. It's strength-based education, and you take this very formalized test, and it'll put you in these particular categories. And I did fall right into those categories of I want to know everything. I'm the acquirer, the curator, the learner, the inquisitive nature. All of those things, I ticked every box off. So I can say I am curious about pretty much almost everything, even the most bizarre things, the most mundane things. I will sit and listen to people talk about it if they're telling a good story, even if I don't see myself ever doing that personally. Because what I tend to do is I take those stories and I find connections with my life, and then hopefully connections with my son's lives or my students' lives or anybody that I'm interacting with. And I can make that segue for them. So it's like, hey, y'all heard this one really cool thing on the radio? Here's how you might apply it to your own life. They probably get tired of me doing those types of things, but I am proud of the fact that I always want to know more.
Yeah, I think that's awesome, and I think that trying to make you said making connections and trying presenting other people these options, or trying to integrate this new information into your own personal way, finding ways to do that. I think that's an awesome trait to have, and I'd like to think that most people, when they do see new information, or do try to kind of ask themselves the question, like, well, how does this affect me, and like, should this be something that I should be integrating or whatnot.
And I enjoy teaching a lot. And one of the things that I love to explain to my students is that the information really is almost always out there anyways. And when they reach me in college is when they are starting to synthesize those things. So they have always heard this particular theory in math, and they always read this particular book in English. But in high school and elementary school, they were very compartmentalized. They were very much in silos, even in the student's head themselves. But I think when they get into college, and hopefully after, is when they will start to say, wait a minute, that thing that I read in the English class, which I didn't think was all related to anything else and it just existed all by itself, I see that this person in the math class is actually using that, right? So they now are primed to hear things in the world around them and make those connections as well. So that information has always been around them. They just haven't been reaching out their tendrils, their little neurons, and feasting on that and pulling it all back together in one spot. And that's what I believe a really good student, a lifelong learner, would continue to do. They're going to make those connections even if they don't seem obvious at the time.
No, it's beautiful. It's a new teacher, right? Because you used to have to actually teach knowledge, but now there's so much around us that it's, here's how to access it. Here's how to connect it. Here's what's important. And here's how it may, benefit you. Like that's huge. I mean, it's so much information that you really do need a guide.
Yeah, and we do have almost too much information, right? We don't know how to be critical of all of the information we have. It used to be, you may have had those red leather-bound Encyclopedia Britannicas on your shelf, like I did. So my dad had 3 sets of them, and that was all the information that existed in the world. That was it in those 26 volumes, 25 because Q didn't even get their own whole volume. And now you can go online, and there's everything. And stuff that you didn't even know that you wanted to know. But the problem is because there's so much, you must be critical of it because so much of it can also be really bad and wrong and mistaken and evil and biased and all of those other things. So that's a skill that we all must cultivate, is to remain critical thinkers.
Yeah, something that I've actually been thinking about the past few weeks is I think the trivium is grammar, logic, and rhetoric, right? So with grammar, we're learning how language works. Like, what are the basic rules? And then with logic, we're being critical about structure of arguments and like what are logical fallacies and whatnot. And then rhetoric is kind of like the output, like what your argument, so to speak, or whatever. And I think that university, like you were saying, is like the knowledge has been around us all, our entire lives, and will continue to be so after secondary education or whatnot. So, taking the critical aspect of analyzing information and then ending with rhetoric is just something like that whole process is just something I've been thinking about recently.
That's great, and you should continue to do so. I think the rhetoric part is probably the most lacking now, isn't it? It's how you share, how you construct your argument to others. Those are important skills scientists have been lacking too. We tend to just kind of speak to each other. And for that reason, we sometimes leave the public behind, and that can be to our detriment.
Yeah, it's slippery when trying to communicate across within bubbles, I guess, for lack of a better term.
That's a good way to do it. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Question 7. What was the most embarrassing or humbling experience of your life?
Dude, if it was really embarrassing, I wouldn't want to tell it. One of the things that I regret, so I'll take that question and I will use rhetorical skills and I'll turn it into one that I want to answer. That is one of the things that I haven't thought about for a while that I regret doing, and it was embarrassing at the time. It was humbling because I was called out on it. So as I explained, my father was a school teacher, and this is an incredibly small school. My graduating class was 42 people, and that included the adult ed. So we knew everybody. And my dad was not only the high school counselor and the civics teacher, but he was also, the coach of this thing and the advisor for this thing. And you had to do everything. This was very much the big fish in the small pond. And that's what I was. I was a big fish in a small pond at that time. I was on all the sports teams and all the knowledge bowl teams and all, I was in the play. I did all the different cliques because we were so small. We couldn't break into small groups ourselves. So I knew everybody. And there's this one guy that was, I don't know even why we had a beef, but I didn't like him. I was jealous of him, possibly. I was angry of him. I was annoyed. And even in high school, so as a somebody who should have known better, I went ahead and I bullied him in the sense where I took we were on a cross country team together and we had a gel pack because I had a sore knee. I cut open the gel pack and I squeezed it through the vent in those skinny little metal lockers. So this goo is running down the inside of his locker, getting on his coat and getting in his school books and probably his lunch. And I would imagine everything that he had on there. And I got busted for it. They finally was called to the principal's office, which half of the time is my own dad. And they said, well, why did you do this? And I was smart enough at the time where I came up with a great answer. I don't remember what it was, but I didn't serve any punishment for this task. But I'm humbled by that. I'm embarrassed I did that. I should have thought better. I didn't have anything against this guy. He wasn't stealing my girlfriend or stealing my thunder, or he wasn't bullying me. I just didn't like him, and I reacted strongly, and I still have a regret about that. I wish I could apologize and tell him that I was sorry for this type of a thing, rather than use my lawyerly mind and get out of it and not actually take responsibility for what I did myself. So I think that's something that humbled me.
And it goes back to what you spoke to earlier about failing. Now that you've failed and you've had that experience, you didn't quite know how it was going to go, but now you've got this feeling, which is, it can be a negative thing, but it can also be fuel, because now it's always there making sure that there's another way to do this.
Ooh, hey, how about that? Makes me feel a little bit better.
All right. Question 8. What is your greatest fear? How did you overcome it? It's actually 2 questions. We'll have to rework that. Sorry.
I think, like, what's the most influential book or any of those things, it changes over time. And I think it depends on my mood and the situation. Early in my life, I was afraid of heights, and there was a very distinct reason. The first day of summer after 4th grade year, went biking with my brother, climbed the tallest tree around, and I fell more than 20 feet from that tree, and shattered my leg. So I spent the entire, and this is in the days of witch doctors, basically. I had a body cast that basically went from armpit to ankle because of this. And they treated me by using traction. So remains a hole through my leg. I've got scars on either side of my knee where there was a pin holding my leg up. I mean, this was medieval type of stuff. So I fell from a tree, I broke my leg, and for a short time afterwards, I was very afraid of heights. This was something that's like, oh my God, I never want this to happen to me again. How did I overcome that, though? I think they call it exposure therapy, but I did it with psychological assistance. I just decided I don't want to be that way. There's some really cool things up high. I want to see those too. I'm curious. And I have no problem now going to the top of the Sears Tower. It's never the Willis Tower. The Sears Tower in Chicago. I don't mind walking a rope bridge in the Dominican Republic over a ravine. Any of these things, I'm cool with that. So for a time, it was heights. For a time, it was public speaking, and then I met my wife doing plays in college, and it's like, well, the way to see her is to keep doing plays in college. So that means I got to talk. And now I speak in front of people for a living as a professor. So that's not a fear anymore. So it's all of those things. There are different stages of my life where I'm afraid of something. And then because of my driving curiosity, I don't want to have that as a limit. And I move on and I try to get it out of the way. I think what I'm most afraid of now as I age, I'm really afraid of loved ones passing away. I'm an atheist. I'm not afraid of myself of dying, but I'm afraid of missing other people. I had a cat die 5 so years ago. I couldn't even go in with the cat, who was my cat for its entire life. I couldn't even take that cat into the vet's office to have her put down at the end of her really long and debilitating illness. My wife did that for me. I was bawling. I just couldn't do it. So I was afraid of that, and to apply that then from a pet to a parent. And my parents are in their 80s now, and they're not going to be with us forever. And I'm really afraid of what's going to happen when they're gone. So I think it's one of those things where it just kind of, for me personally, that fear changes as different stages of my life come about.
It's interesting. You say that's a fear, but it's what I respect the most in older people is through that exposure that they've seen so many people pass, important ones, that they have this just different feeling and different view. And when people pass, they've got just a charm about it that you can't quite like. So, I mean, I don't want to say you'll get there in a good way, but it's something that I really, really value in older people, that when I see it, I can't stop. I don't know.
They know they lived a good life. They're ready. It's been long. They've accomplished things. They're moving on. Yeah, I imagine in 40 years from now, when I'm even older, my next fear is a dandelion in my lawn. I'll be that guy that's out working the lawn for the entire afternoon because I'm retired. I've got nothing else to do. So that'll be my fear. Or the kid that keeps coming onto my lawn. It'll change. I won't care about death anymore. Now it's a bad front yard. So my fear will change then too.
I want to die. I just want to die with a nice yard.
Yeah, when you said your next fear, I was thinking to myself, "Oh, he already has his next one planned out." Wow,
you gotta think he's fear, right?
Yeah.
When I'm done with this one, I got to work on something else.
Yeah. I'm always planning ahead.
All right, question 9: what quality do you most admire in a man? Why?
So here's an answer, and I'm curious on what you two have heard. I think this is going to be an answer that you haven't heard. And that's because one of the things I have noticed, again, lately, that I really admire in a man and a woman as well, somebody who is taciturn, somebody who is reticent, somebody who is reserved, somebody who doesn't have to yell to be heard, somebody who knows that there is a power in silence. And I can really admire somebody who will, and tends to be older people now. They don't always need to be the center of attention. They don't always have to have the next story, and the next story isn't always have to be about them. They can ask a question of other people and listen to an answer. They can actively listen. They can powerfully listen by being attentive. They're not the ones that are always speaking. What I'm finding more and more, and maybe that's an academic thing, and now I'm seeing the administrators always have to say something, although they never really say anything. It's the people who can sit quietly, listen, reflect, take it in, synthesize, and then when they speak, they sometimes are able to command a room. It's like, oh wait, that old physicist with the crazy hair, that person raised their hand, they're going to say something. I know this is going to be important because they're not always talking. And I admire people who are reticent. It's not that they're shy. It's not that they're bashful. It's not that they're unassuming. They just don't feel that they are always the one that has to be the center of attention. They don't always have to say something. When they say something, it means something. And I admire that.
Yeah, that is not a answer I've heard before. At least not put the way that you put it. But,
Yeah, I guess the closest would probably be your friend who, said the same thing about his father, that his father didn't speak very much or get angry or anything. He was a man of few words. And so it's like you grasp those words. They mean something because they're well thought out and articulated. They're not just, just verbal diarrhea. It's it's the exact same way. But it's also a weird thing too, because, and you say, it doesn't make you, that you're, more a different type of a person. You don't feel you need to be the center of attention. But in a sense, when you're that person, when the party's going on, you may kind of, float to the side. So, it's something that I guess is not something everybody can do.
No, I would imagine you need to be comfortable enough where you don't have to have people come up and talk to you. You can enjoy a silence. And that's difficult for people, even if you're riding in the car with somebody, and it's somebody you kind of know, but don't, not like a spouse where I've been with my wife for more than 20 years. We can be silent with each other. It's not uncomfortable.
Exactly.
But for a lot of people, it's like, oh, if nobody's talking, this is weird. I've got to say something. Mm-hmm. And you've got to be strong and knowing enough of yourself to say, I'm okay for kind of biting my tongue as this next conversation goes by, or I'm okay standing over on the side. If somebody wants to talk, they'll come over to me. That type of a thing.
Yeah, I love it. Knowing when to interject or when to just let somebody else talk, and even whatever, even if they're saying something that may not be too important, they're just talking to talk, like I am right now. Like maybe you just let them finish and have some patience and empathy, But yeah. Question 10. Who were/are your role models and why?
Aside from family members, my professional role models were very smart and strong women. In college, I got turned on to the field in which I am now I have a doctorate because Elizabeth Brumfield just told the most interesting stories and opened my eyes to the most interesting cultures. And I sat in on a general education class is one of those things that you have to take because you have to check a box. And I didn't know what this topic was. Again, I came from an incredibly rural, tiny little school. We didn't have anthropology at all. The only thing I knew about anthropology was, Indiana Jones movies, which is probably still true for many people. And I sat in on that class, and I went to college to be a lawyer. But as soon as I took Liz Brumfield's class, I knew I wanted to understand the world a fraction of how well she does. So she got me turned on to the field. And then in university, when I was getting my postgraduate degree, it was 2 or 3 other strong, intelligent women. These ones from Indiana University, Ann Pyburn and Katie Vitale and Della Cook. They were women who knew how to listen because as an anthropologist, they asked a lot of questions. They're women who know how to research. They're women who knew how to organize a field school and a bunch of people getting together to go off and do a dig. They were able to solicit funds from federal organizations. They were able to control the administrative hurdles that they had to jump through. They were just smart, driven, strong, and confident women. So I think those were my role models. Those are the people who I want to be like still now when I'm teaching.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's always interesting to hear how people continue make these connections and get funding to go to the Dominican Republic and like the administrative things like you were kind of talking about. It's always interesting to hear how what goes on in the background and if you were because I really wanted to major in anthropology, but I ended up with philosophy just because it was available at the time. But yeah, if I was to continue going down anthropology, archaeology, it's just something that interests me.
That administrative part is an issue. I don't know if it's one of our questions. It's like, what word do you hate hearing? It's this idea of saying no. The people who sort of are gatekeepers, the people who control travel and control funding and control permissions. It's easier for them to say no. It's really easy for anybody to say no. It doesn't. You don't have to do any extra work. You don't have to worry about any ramifications. The default for everybody should just be no. It's easy. But my role models are the people who listen to a no and then go, yeah, I'm still going to ask again. I'm going to do it again. I'm going to do it anyways, whatever happens to be. Those are the people who I'm impressed with, that I want to model myself after. The people who don't take no's as answers.
Yeah. Question 11.
My favorite.
What institution of society or structural aspect of modern life would you change given the chance?
Capitalism as it applies to coffee, man. They shouldn't charge so much for that thing. We all need it. It's the nectar of life. It's like charging for air. No. In the current situation, this like any of these other things, I would have a different answer at a different moment in time, but it's all about context. In the context of the fall of 2020, the institution of society or structural aspect of modern life, I would attempt to change, and I do in my very small ways, is institutionalized racism. I'm not going to be the person to change it, but at least I don't have to be an instrument to continue it. It's come to light to so many people that there is a caste system in the US, and we can expand this around the world, but specifically in the US, people are born to a situation. It's very difficult for them to change that situation. People who are born into privilege might be able to understand their privilege, but it doesn't mean they still don't carry that bias with them. And I think it's harmful to our society. It is becoming dangerous to our society. And I strive to work with my colleagues. I strive to be an ally to make any little change I can against institutional racism. It was again, in that school I came from, there was one person of color in any of the yearbooks I ever remember. So I'm not just saying in my senior class, but in the classes ahead of me and behind me. And he and his sisters were adopted by the pharmacist. They were adopted from Colombia. So for me, the only black person, and in my little tiny world, he was a black person, right? Dude was Colombian. I'm not even sure if he identifies as black. I don't know if other people would picture him as that. And it all depends on how you're raised, of course, in the society and what they construct for you. But I constructed him as a black person. And I look back at that and just like laugh. It's like, really? So that was the only person of color with whom I was having any interactions. So my whole life was sheltered. I went to college, and on orientation day, these weren't my roommates, but they were the people we spent the orientation during the summer with. And the name on the door was mine and a person named Gwen. And my dad saw that and said, "What the hell kind of school are you going to?" I mean, so first he's reading that as a female, and then we open the door and Gwen is African American. It's like, that's fantastic now, because that really helped my exposure to what's going on. And since then, and since the summer of 2020 and so on, I've been trying to read the books on how to be an anti-racist, read books about the caste system, read as much as I can, be curious about this issue, and see how I am a factor and what I can do to change myself to at least make others' lives, if not easier, understandable. So I can think we can rotate it back to empathy again.
Yeah, empathy is a recurring theme. It's important, but you would think that, okay, in the grand scheme of things, the United States isn't that old, but we have been around for a long time, and this issue of racism keeps popping up. But the golden rule has been around for forever. Treat others the way that you want to be treated. Like, I don't know, it just doesn't seem like that hard of a concept for me. For other people to grasp. To me.
It's how they define other. And we as humans regularly define ourselves as in opposition to others. So when you and I went to the Dominican, the people we were studying were the Taino. Taino wasn't what they called themselves. Their word Taino just meant we're the people. We're the good people. So when the Spanish come over and the Italians come over and the Portuguese come over and say, hey, what's your name? Who are you? Why? We're people. We don't have anybody to compare ourselves. Why do we have a name? So we are always looking for that other, that person to whom we identify ourselves as not being a group of. So I think that golden rule is to treat others as you want to be treated, or to treat your brother as you want to be treated, however you want to phrase it. I don't think they're being inclusive in that other. I think they're saying treat others, the people who look like me, as I want to be treated, because they don't think about others. I'm using both a capital O other and others as in anybody else.
Mm-hmm. Do you think, just because I wouldn't ask this question to anybody else, but because of your particular field of study, do you think that people have a tendency to self-segregate? Like if there's two groups and they're in the same geographical area, do they is that just like a natural human thing to do? Like societally, or
I don't know if it's ingrained naturally as in genetic, although you could potentially argue it is, because it's passing on your genes and the genes of your brother and sister and cousins, because they are somewhat your genes. But yes, all of the research tends to show people gravitate towards what they're familiar with, what they're comfortable with. So whether it's a high school lunchroom where you see all the white kids sitting together and all the Latinos sitting together, it happens. It happens regularly. We need to make a conscious effort to see that comfort zone and step out of it. And they can be very innocent reasons why you're sitting with those people. Your parents might have similar jobs. You might have similar interests. You're video gamers. And then there's another group, and they're talking about their parents working in the fields, or that their cousins have migrated in. They've got a different conversation going on. And for that reason, we do tend to self-select. We tend to hang out with people with the similar interests. The problem, and it is a problem, is those people with similar interests also tend to look like us. And if we don't break through those walls, if we don't say, well, I'll go sit with somebody that doesn't play the same video games and listen to the same music as I, and I will still find something that I have in common with them. I will listen to their stories. And that's the way where we can at least break down those tiny little barriers between people. Again, that's not on its own going to destroy structural racism. But these small steps are a start for some of us.
Yeah, I mean, pretty simple, right?
Bigger things we can do.
Exposure therapy. Hang out with people that are different than you.
There you go. If you're afraid of it, hang out with them and you'll see there's nothing to be afraid of.
Exactly. I love how we're looping back around to fear and getting experience to conquer that.
But I do want to sort of throw a little footnote in there. As a white male of my age in the U.S., I can say there's nothing to be afraid of. I will drive home this evening, and I'm not going to think that there's the cop behind me is going to do something, right? I understand I have a privilege, and regularly I use that privilege to help others, but I also sometimes use it to me. I can walk anywhere in this part of the state. If I'm carrying a clipboard and I'm wearing a suit jacket, I wear bow ties too. If I can walk anywhere in the world and nobody's going to do anything to me. So that's a privilege. That's why I can have the privilege not to be afraid. Not everybody has that.
Question 12. What is the most courageous thing you have ever done in your life or seen?
I don't know. I may have to pass on this one. I'm afraid anything I say is going to be trite. I don't know.
Well, courage can be strange too. It can be seeing somebody who's overcoming a challenge in their own life or a disability or something you never thought that could be done, but you just push through it. It doesn't have to be like I jumped in the water and saved a drowning child.
Yeah.
But again,
I think
there's no right or wrong answer, so it's okay if you don't have an answer.
it's one of those things where I hope to see it every day. The people who are doing the small things to help others, the people who, and we'll circle back to this one too, the people who will do an extra step so that they do not burden others. So, when you're going faster in the highway lane because the guy tailgating behind you must be in a hurry to get someplace. These little things, I don't know if they're not courageous, but they make our lives better. They're things people don't have to do. And by doing so, I appreciate those things. I don't know if I would go back and go, wow, that is a profile in courage. That person needs to be awarded a Medal of Freedom.
What's the most valuable thing you can give? It's your time. That is your life. When you go out of your way where you're not getting anything else except for making somebody else's life easier. I mean, it sounds trivial, but it's the ultimate sacrifice, even if it's just a little bit at a time.
I like that. I like altruism. I think anytime people do something altruistic, we should call it courageous. And therefore, maybe they'll do it more often. So they do a selfless act on behalf of others. And exactly as you said, not because it benefits them, but for the pure fact that it benefits other people. That should be courageous.
I agree. And, just doing those small like acts of kindness or like paying it forward. Sometimes, that does take a little bit of courage because maybe it's uncomfortable. Like I was standing in line at the coffee shop actually a few months ago, and a little woman in front of me had dropped her driver's license, and I don't know if it was just me like overanalyzing the situation or whatever, but I was like just afraid to say like, hey, you dropped this or whatever. And it took me, a few moments to get up the gumption to tell her that. And so I don't know if that's not really paying it forward or in my mind, that's not really being kind. That's just being like, considerate. Like who wouldn't say, maybe there are people out there that they see people drop stuff and not say anything. I don't know.
I bet there are. Where they aren't.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say whenever your fly's down, like nobody says anything. So you're within a lot of people with that group.
So it's a less than satisfactory answer for that one, but the other 12 were decent.
Well, we've got the 13th question here next. What does it mean to be a man in today's world?
A man in today's world is somebody who is respectful of others, who values the opinions of others. It doesn't necessarily mean they have to take them to be themselves, but will listen to others. For me, a man in today's world is a feminist. It's a man who understands that males and females are equal and will do what he needs to do to benefit everybody, regardless of their sex and gender and orientation and everything else. So a man in today's society, for me, again, you're talking to somebody who hangs out with a bunch of sociologists and I taught a class recently in women and gender studies. A man for me is a feminist. It's somebody who, to put it simply, at that time calls themselves a man. I don't care what they look like. I'm not sure it matters what their biology is. If they, if we construct them, if they identify as a man, and we as a society socially construct them as meeting our interpretation of man. So we've got to meet both way, halfway. But for me, it's somebody who believes everybody else is worthy of respect and should be treated equally.
Yeah, definitely respecting other people's paths, and I think is absolutely important. And part of that is, like you said, valuing their opinions, even though, like, even if you don't necessarily agree with them, you can at least acknowledge them and, try not to be an asshole.
Hopefully I'm not a unique case, but I think it is an interesting situation, where my construction of manliness probably differs than most. And here's why I think that's true. It might be wrong, but I have built this story in my own head, so I like it now. My parents had a son, and then my dad took him outside, and they did all the manly things. Right? They chopped wood for the fireplace in our house. They mowed the 40 acres and they farmed the potatoes. We had all those things. I was incredibly rural. They then had a second son, and my dad took him outside and did all those things too. Right? And that one learned how to hunt, and can change the oil and brakes in a car. I was born as the third son. In my head, my mom went, dude, I got to have somebody. So what I was taught was how to cook, how to do laundry, how to clean the house, how to paint. She held me back in kindergarten because we really enjoyed watching soap operas together. So I'm like a year older than most of my peers all the way through school because my mom enjoyed her stories and I was the person with whom she could enjoy them. I'm not saying I was raised as a female. I'm not saying they'd put me in a dress. And what I'm trying to say is cooking and cleaning are just as manly as hunting and fishing and doing all of those things, just like hunting and fishing are just as womanly as cooking and cleaning. I really personally have embodied the fact that as long as you make other people's lives better, it doesn't really matter what you're doing. And it has worked for me. It has been useful for me. My wife and I met in college. We met at an audition, and she can tell a really interesting story of how she then got up early in the next morning and went to breakfast with me, putting on makeup and getting dressed and all the fancy stuff, even though she didn't have a class until 4:00. So she was sort of hunting me down. But we then went downstairs and went to the shared laundry system, and she's throwing all the shit together in the same load. And I said, no, that's not how you do it. And I'm incredibly cheap, but I'm incredibly well trained by my mom. And I said, you give me those quarters, I will do your laundry. I'll do my own laundry and I'll do your laundry and I'll get something out of this. And I continued. She does not do our laundry today. I've taught my son how to do it. And I cook at home. And when my son was born, she went back to work. My wife went back to work. She makes more money than I do, and I'm okay with that. And I stayed home with him not because I'm trained as a woman, but because I was a graduate student. I didn't have anything better to do. She's a lawyer. She was making money. Why shouldn't she go back? Right. So I hung out with him. It was difficult for me. I'd go to all these little play dates and stuff, and it's a bunch of moms and me. But because of that, I still get annoyed when all the letters used to come home from elementary school to "Dear Mrs. VanderVeen, your son." It's like, she doesn't care. I mean, she does. But if you're talking about a parenting thing, we're doing it equally, but I think I should be involved in this as well, right? My parents raised me to do things equally. I'm raising my son to do things equally, to do all of the things, to do what he's interested in, do what makes my life easier. So he can mow, but he also makes a mean cheesecake.
Oh, yeah. I love that you brought up cooking, okay, cooking and cleaning, like the more domestic tasks, if you will, those are so important, especially for, any single men out there that want to attract a mate. Those are, cooking, it's a good skill to have if you want to impress, the person that you're pursuing. And then cleaning, or just the way that you keep your house and to have things set up and, presentable. Is it presentable or is it dirty? So yeah, I love it that you, yeah. So
And it saves money.
Yeah, since I've started doing more cooking for myself, like I can't, like going out to restaurants doesn't really, it, it's not fun anymore because the food's always messed up. It's not made the right way, the way I wanted it to make it.
There you go.
So it's just kind of, it's better once you learn how to do it, I think. So that was the end of the first 13 questions. Do you have some time to go into the bonus questions? We've got 8 of them.
I can come up with some answers. We'll see how it goes.
And just like as we're going, man, questions are as long as you want them to be. So if you want to go on a novelic rant, go for it, man. But if you got 10 minutes, we're here for you.
And the respondent who said the thing he admired most in men was taciturn and reticent just keeps not shutting up.
I was going to ask you
in there.
I was going to ask you to repeat those 2 words because I was trying to take notes and trying to write them down to look them up later. So yeah, what was it?
Taciturn and reticent. Think Clint Eastwood's characters.
Okay. Makes
Not
sense.
necessarily he himself, but his character.
Yeah. So the first bonus question, I guess, is kind of the flip side to the 13th question is what quality do you most admire in a woman?
Oh man. Intelligence, by far. I appreciate a strong, self-sufficient individual.
I wanna hawani. I wanna hawani. Yo what? 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 I wanna hawani. I wanna hawani. Yo what?
Why is one man rich and another man poor? Why we ain't satisfied? Why we gotta have more? Why your suicide rates on the rest so high? Why I tell you the truth but you say don't lie? Why is being a good father at an all-time low? Why is it acceptable? Yo, why I don't know. Why she blame him and he blame her? It's useless. Ask yourself this question. Why you making excuses? Why do parents gotta bury their kids? Why we text and drive, not caring how scary it is? Why it's so hard to forgive and leave the past behind? And if you did, then that's divine. Why don't you help your brother when you see him fall? Why do we act like God don't see it all? Why do we call them black, them white, them Asians and use labels? Now that's racism.
I wanna hawani.
Why?
I wanna hawani. Yo why? I wanna hawani.
Why?
I wanna hawani. Yo why? I wanna hawani.
Why?
I wanna hawani. Yo why? I wanna hawani.
Why?
I wanna hawani. Yo
Why is
why?
there innocent people locked up for life? While some people can't say nothing nice. Why do we always gotta question what all of it means? And why won't you follow your dreams? Tell me why. The night when you took my dad, why'd you let me see my grandpa cry? And tell me why. And why do you choose to hide, even though you was born to fly? And tell me why. And why don't we turn from all the hate? And why don't we learn from all mistakes? Why do I keep on wrecking these fat beats? And teachers don't make more than professional athletes? And why? And why? And why? And why? And why? And why?
I wanna hawani.
Why?
I wanna hawani. Yo why? I wanna hawani.
Why?
I wanna hawani. Yo why? I wanna hawani. I wanna hawani. Yo why? I wanna hawani. I wanna hawani. Yo why?
This should be considered entertainment and not therapy. We hope you benefit from our resources available at 13questionspodcast.com. Thank you for listening.